Hey theatre addicts, my name is Danielle and tonight I'm going to be reviewing Macbeth at Bard on the Beach. I'm really excited about this show because I actually directed Macbeth a good number of years ago, just at the Fringe, but it has become quite close to my heart through that experience. So I'm quite excited to see what they do, what choices they make, and how much I remember of the play, because I haven't looked at it in years. Chris Abraham, who is Crow's Theatre artistic director, also directed at Stratford, I believe. Not Stratford-upon-Avon, but Stratford in Ontario, the big Shakespeare festival there. So I'm excited to see what he'll do with it, and if he's going to bring kind of a new voice to Bard on the Beach. In my pretentious youth, I was a little bit resentful of Bard on the Beach because they really turned it into an institution, you know, and they are commercial. And in my older age, I kind of think that's good because they're still around and they're still managing to bring theater to a lot of people and Shakespeare to a lot of people. In my youth, I kind of thought that was like selling out, but I'm changing my mind about that, and I do think I've seen some really amazing productions there. I don't always agree with their choices, so I'm very curious to see what I think this evening. I don't know if you're familiar with the play Macbeth, but it's quite a tricky play to stage. It's almost backwards. Like, the beginning is full of a lot of action, a lot happens, and then the second kind of half is mostly exposition. I think they handled it pretty well, actually. There was a scene, well, they cut some of the boring battle scenes, which I was so grateful for. I get really like, but some of the battle scenes that have a lot of exposition in them, they actually managed to stage in a really interesting way. And I did notice that a few lines were given to, like, condensed into one character instead of multiple characters. Some of the monologues were performed with the action actually happening behind them, like what they were talking about, which is quite cinematic. I really enjoyed that. And the other thing that's really tricky about staging Macbeth is that it's got lots of really fast scenes. And when you stage this in a kind of more contemporary way, that gets very difficult because then you've got all these scene changes and that becomes very tricky. So I really like the choice that they made with the set, and they were inspired by Shakespeare's Globe and kept it very, very simple. They had these two trees kind of where the pillars were a set further back than they would be in Shakespeare's Globe. I mean, it wasn't exactly the same. The stage is different shape and the balcony's different shape and that kind of stuff, but it was kind of inspired by the original Globe Theatre. So it was really cool to see those stylistic influences, and I think the two pillars that turned into trees were really especially cool. I read in the program that the set was supposed to be mostly black and white and shades of grey. The stage was wooden, which I just thought was gorgeous, very rustic, which works really well with the kind of medieval castle. And there were the black trees. I didn't see any white set pieces, maybe I missed it, but there was quite a lot of shades in white and black in the costumes. So I can see how that kind of worked into the kind of dark, dank kind of atmosphere. The costumes were absolutely gorgeous. They were so lush. Again, inspired by kind of more Elizabethan style with some kind of medieval influences, and just really, really beautiful, not distractingly beautiful, because sometimes it can be all about the costumes. It wasn't that, but they felt really solid, very earthy, very perfect for the setting, and especially the coronation scene. Those, like, the difference between the nobleman and the king and queen costumes it was really, really cool. I really liked it, and just really stunning attention to detail, and the fabrics and the sound effects were really cool too. So I read in the program that apparently some of the characters are supposed to have themes, like different kind of thematic sounds for different characters. I didn't notice that at all, although I wish I could watch it again just listening for the sound, because, you know, I was concentrating on other things. But it was really cool. There was a lot of drum, and I think it was all drums, but there was one particular drum that really sounded like, you know, in the olden days they would make thunder by, like, shaking a sheet of metal or something. It sounded like that, and I just thought those little touches, those little nods to a more Elizabethan way of doing things, I really appreciated as a Shakespeare geek myself. I don't know how much other people got out of them, but I thought it was really cool. This actually was the least shouty Bard on the Beach I think I've probably ever seen. The actors were wearing microphones, which definitely helps. The first scene or two I was a little bit worried. They are, like, scenes between soldiers, so you can understand how they might be a little bit over volume. and some of the actors understood how to project in a way that was supported more than others. I could hear the damage in some of the actors' voices, but it really wasn't necessary, and that was a lovely thing that it wasn't necessary. There's this beautiful whispering scene when Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are plotting, which was really done at kind of a whispering level, and we could all hear it. So the microphones really do work. I encourage actors to enjoy that a little bit more and only be excessively loud when the scene calls for it, and not because you know the space is really large. You have a microphone, that's what it's there for. It's to support you so you don't have to blow out your voice. So some of the actors managed that a little bit better than others. Lady Macbeth wasn't one of the people who was shouting all the way through, but there were a couple of scenes where she was really hysterical, right? And even that, you could hear the toll on her voice. By the end of the show, her voice sounded different than it did at the beginning. Macbeth is played by Ben Carlson, and Lady Macbeth by Moya O'Connell. I hope I'm saying that right. And they both had very strong performances, very well cast. Some scenes much stronger than others. Like, I certainly have favorite scenes, and I felt like watching the actors, you could tell which their favorite scenes were. They were the ones they gave all their energy and all their passion to. And then there were a couple of other scenes that maybe weren't paid attention to as much as they could have been. But overall, they were really, really strong. It's very heavy lifting play, and I think they did a really great job. My least favorite scene, I think, between the Macbeths was probably the banquet scene. Didn't quite work for me. That is a very tricky scene to do. I kind of didn't believe that anyone would still listen to him as king after that amazing freakout. The other person that I absolutely adored was Andrew Wheeler as Macduff. Again, there were a couple of, and it wasn't even scenes, it was a couple of lines that I was like, ooh, that didn't really land perfectly. But oh my gosh, just his full emotional commitment. There's a scene right near the end where he's being told about the fate of his wife and his children, and it comes off of a kind of boring scene with Malcolm. It's like my least favorite scene, I'm sorry. But lots of exposition again. And that was kind of like, didn't quite fit for me. But then going into that emotional scene where he finds out about his wife and kids, it was riveting. And I think there were 3 or 4 other people on stage. And even when he wasn't speaking, I was just watching him because he was so full and so in it. Also, Macbeth, when he hears about Lady Macbeth's death, I feel like all the revelations about death scenes were really good. Lady Macbeth just killed the final scene where she's washing her hands in the dreamlike state. That was absolutely fantastic. The witches were really fantastic. I quite enjoy this kind of a Polanski kind of feel. I don't know if you've seen Roman Polanski's Macbeth. There's that kind of really gritty, really dirty kind of feeling to the witches, and I felt strong influence of that in this portrayal of the witches. The beard line didn't quite work for me. They didn't have beards, so it didn't make sense. But overall, I felt like they really worked within the scene, and they were kind of real and gritty. Sometimes people go a little bit too far into the ethereal with the witches and kind of make them more like fairies, and I like this kind of more earthy interpretation. I thought that the ladies who did the witches did a great job. As someone who knows the play really well, my attention did wander once or twice, especially in scenes that I know really well that I know I don't connect to. But overall, I think this is actually probably the best production of Macbeth I've ever seen. It's a really tricky play to stage. There's just so many logistical issues. There's that whole, like, all the action happens at the beginning thing, and it's tricky to get the nuance and the, to really relate to the characters, and I felt like they did a really strong job of weaving all of that together. There were moments where it was a bit much, but there were a lot of moments of subtlety, a lot of moments of depth of feeling, and overall I think it was a really strong production of Macbeth. It's running until the 13th of September down in Varnier Park, Bard on the Beach, and if you do get a chance to see Macbeth, please leave your comments below. I'd love to hear what you thought of it. There were lots of moments that I didn't mention just because of time, so I'd love to hear what your favorite bits were, what you thought about certain interpretations of the script, and I will see you next time.